Could you have ever imagined that you would be, you know, in your mid-40s and still making rock music and still making rock music that sold as well as it did and got received as well as it did?
Not in a million years. When I first came into this business when I was 18, I thought, if this lasts for about 8 or 9 months, I'll be really pleased. So, you know, all this 20-odd years later.
It's become an interesting cultural thing in the sense that people like yourself are not only just doing it for yourselves, you've almost taken on this heroic stature, you're redefining what people thought it meant to be middle-aged.
Yeah, we're pioneers, I suppose, really. I mean, breaking new fronts. I mean, I don't know where it's going to end. How long will we go on for? I really can't see myself doing this when I'm over 50. I mean, that's ridiculous. But I said that when I was 30, you know. Perhaps the music counts more than anything now, perhaps more so than image. I mean, image has played such a great deal, and fashion has played such a great deal, such a great part of the selling of music. Perhaps it doesn't quite count as much as it used to. I mean, look at Phil Collins, he hasn't got hair on his head, but I mean, there's not many people out selling when it comes to tickets and records.
So you're saying that despite 10 years of rock video and MTV and, you know, the bringing back of good-looking, classic, sleek entertainers who get molded and stuff like that, you still feel optimistic that the music can still count for a lot? Oh,
dearly hope so. God, believe me, I've seen them come and go. I've seen a lot of people come and go, and I've survived, and a lot of us have survived. And I would dearly like to think it would be the music above, you know, flashy clothes, funny haircuts, or whatever. And that's what it should be. It should always be the music before fashion.
So at the end of the day, you're a working artist as opposed to a tabloid star or a celebrity or a jet setter.
Well, I think in the way the public look at me, I'm probably a little bit of each. In my own heart, I know there's not many work much harder than I do, really. I mean, this is over 100 concerts I've done since the beginning of the summer, since April, and this is what, now October. I think that's pretty hard work. And I enjoy most of it, I must admit. Really, honestly, I enjoy it.
Now, people, I suppose more tabloid-oriented people might say that it's having a new marriage to a young woman is something that would keep one young.
Nah, it's a lot of old bollocks. I mean, and sometimes I wish she was 30, you know, I mean, just so people would get off my back. I mean, she's got a brain of a 30-year-old. I mean, she looks like a 30-year-old sometimes. The next minute, she can look like a 12-year-old schoolgirl, but I didn't marry her because she's 21 or 22. It's ridiculous.
Obviously, they're young people who are discovering you every day, and
jolly good.
thanks to the high standards of the material you've recorded for the last 5, 10, 15 years. Do you feel there's a segment of your audience that has probably grown up with you as well, that were 15
God, yeah.
and are now still coming to the concerts at 35 and 40?
Yes, absolutely. I can feel it every night. I can feel it, I can see it, and I'm very proud of them. You know, especially when I do Reason to Believe. And I told the audience this album is now 20 years old. You know, and I can hear that there's people out there that bought the album and know the song. It's a wonderful feeling of satisfaction to know that people have grown up with it. There are not many of them, but they're there.
Has there been a classic story of someone coming up to you at a concert and saying, oh, my mom's a really big fan of yours or something?
Oh, that happens every night, every day. Yeah, can I have the autograph from my mum?
Yeah.
I don't mind.
The way that people make records now, and specifically the way that you make records, I notice that rhythmically, purely rhythmically, they do this real four-square thing. Everything's incredibly even in terms of the rhythm. The one is always there, exactly, computer-generated or whatever it is. That seems so much the antithesis, as well, should be probably, to what you were doing 20 years ago, the rhythms that, say, the Faces had. Yeah,
we never used to hold the rhythms down. Tracks used to speed up and slow down. I don't know, it's... I think the Black Crowes do that very well now. You know, let them do it. I think there could be a great deal more looseness in the records I'm making. A little return to that style of playing. Perhaps a few more drinks before you go and start recording, you know. It sometimes is a bit sterile for me in the studio. I have to behave myself a lot more than I used to, and I don't enjoy it quite as much as I used to.
Why is that?
simply because I have to behave myself. I'm sometimes put in the position of being co-producer. And I have to look after everybody around me. I have to sort of stand and say, right, lads, here we go, count the song in. And
but
in the old days, we go down to the pub and have a few drinks and just make up as you go along. Literally used to make the songs up in the studio. You can't do that anymore. I mean, it's just a terrible waste of money. Well, maybe you can.
Because we associate so much of 90s and 80s image making with artists who have songs written for them, using, you know, Paul Abdul or whoever, artists who their material is almost entirely outside. Are you afraid of this either making you a lazy songwriter or setting a bad precedent for you?
This is the first time I can remember where the first 3 singles off an album haven't been a song that I've written. So my songwriting's gone down the toilet lately. No, it's given me a good kick up the arse. It really has. I've really got to look hard at my songwriting this time for the next album. It makes me work at it even harder. I would hate to rely on outside material, because then you never know where it's going to come from. I think that's been the downfall of many a good singer's career. You know, for instance, not that her career's gone downhill, but Tina Turner doesn't write any songs. So therefore, if the songs don't come from the outside, she's got to be struggling. Whereas I always feel like I can write my own songs. I'm in somewhat control of my own destiny.
Welcome back. I'm Tim Sommer. When you listen to Storyteller, Rod Stewart's 4-CD retrospective of his long career, you find that Rod has worked in a lot of different styles. But from Maggie May to Rhythm of My Heart, Rod always seems to return home, to music that has roots in his Scottish heritage. And that's where we begin the second part of our conversation with Rod Stewart. A lot has been made, rightly or wrongly, of, say, the Celtic roots or the Scottish roots coming through in the music. And it seems to me that English musicians are far more likely to somehow incorporate their ethnic roots, distant or otherwise, into the pop music they make than Americans are. Have you noticed that?
Well, I don't know about the English. I think the Scots certainly do. Me, for one, being half and half of each, great deal of influence Celtic melodies have had in my music over the years, especially the early albums.
Was that something that you heard that much when you were a young man, when you were growing up? There was real ethnic music in your neighborhood and in your family and in your pubs?
No. No, the only thing I could hear where I lived was trains going by, because I lived near a train station. But I was brought up on the likes of Al Jolson. My whole family loved Al Jolson. So that was the earliest influence. Earliest influence I can remember coming out of the womb was Al Jolson.
Would you say that you came from a musical family?
Insomuch as they play musical instruments, no, but they certainly do love music, and they like a party, the Stewarts. We've always liked a party and a shout and a holler.
Was there any point where a light bulb went up over your head and you said, hey, I can incorporate instruments like the mandolin and the violin and make rock music with that? Instruments that are not traditionally thought of as rock and roll instruments? I always liked American folk music. I was always in love with the likes of Woody Guthrie and Rambling Jack Elliott. So that's why I first heard the mandolins and dulcimers and the piano harp and things like that. And it was a natural instinct for me to incorporate mandolins. I loved the sound of mandolin. It was just natural for me. It wasn't an accident. I knew that a mandolin hadn't been used on a record, on a rock and roll record ever, and I couldn't remember one before Maggie May. So that was it. Was it a fight?
No, it was. I was producing the album. I produced that album. I didn't have any opposition whatsoever.
Was there a healthy competition on stage and in the studio between you and Jeff Beck, or is that too much been made of that?
I don't think there was a competition. Jeff, you mean trying to blow each other off the stage?
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
Jeff never tried to do that with me. No, and I never tried to do that with him. I think in the early days, Woody and I were a little. We used to try and outdress him occasionally. You know, I mean, the clothes we used to wear when we first came over in 1968 or 69, I think it was. But no, Jeff is a great musician to work with. He keeps out of the way. He's a perfect musician. Plays when he's supposed to, fits in around the vocals.
There's a sense that you're challenged by working with a stellar musician like that, as opposed to, say, being intimidated?
I don't know. Jeff's always been a mate. I can't ever think of him being as an intimidating individual. He's always been like a mate. We've had our we used to row about because we never got paid. Woody and I were in the band and we never used to get paid for being in the band. I mean, something to keep us going. That's the only thing we used to have rows about. The fact that Jeff used to go off in a limousine and leave me and Woody calling for a taxi. Those are the only things we used to row about.
How does your relationship stand these days?
Pretty good. I'm sure we're going to work together pretty soon.
Is there anyone you really like to work with that you haven't?
They're all dead. They're all dead. I mean, Otis, Sam Cooke. I mean, I would give my right arm just to see Sam Cooke perform, because I never even saw Sam Cooke. I saw Otis Redding perform, because in those days I used to just come on and sing for 15 minutes. I was in tears. I just cried my eyes out when he was playing in London.
Did you ever meet him?
Nah, I was just a fan in the crowd.
There are a lot of young bands in America right now who seem to have returned to a blues and R&B based sound, very young bands. And I'm wondering whether you think those people are getting it from the sources, the same people that you guys were getting it from, or if they're in fact just getting it from like your old records or the Stones' old records.
I wouldn't know at all. You know, it's interesting to see how that Commitments album has sold so well. You know, I'm wondering that too, whether people have heard the original Wilson Pickett Midnight Hour or they've just heard the Commitments do it. It's interesting, and I can't answer you. I mean, I'd love them to hear the originals. The originals cannot be beat. I mean, I sing the Midnight Hour. We do it in the show now, but I know Wilson Pickett does it a lot better than I do. But you look at people out there and they go, we've never heard this song before. It's 20-odd years old.
See, I think that it's very likely that those people have never heard the originals, even sometimes, you know, the musicians. They just know them off of the
versions. Yeah,
the people who've covered them. And certainly a lot's probably been made of the similarity, for better or worse, between, say, the Black Crowes and the music that the Faces made. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I like the Black Crowes. I think they certainly remind me of the Faces, and I'm very proud of them in a way, and I'm glad they've done so well. Glad they've done well, because I think we needed a band like that right now. You know, a good, loose, very loose band. And there again, but I can't listen to the guy sing that song after Otis. I'm sorry, Otis does it, and that's the end of it. It's a good interpretation, but it's not as good as Otis's.
So you're more flattered by that sort of thing than you're thinking, well, these people are doing a 20-year-old shtick. That was mine when they were hardly born.
Well, I'm sure they'll disagree with you. I mean, if you ask the Black Crowes, have you been influenced by the Faces? They probably say no, the same way as the Faces used to say we were never influenced by the Stones. Of course we were. We used to love the Stones. I still do. That's the way it is when you come into this business. You've got to put everybody else down around you. We used to be like that.
Still, the go through the roof. But not only has Rod rolled with the changes, his instrument, his voice, has remained intact. In fact, he tells us he's never sounded better. Here's more of our exclusive conversation with Rod Stewart.
In the liner notes on Vagabond Heart, you say, at last I may be getting the hang of it. I assume referring to making records. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, I'm still learning the art, which I think we all are. I haven't made what I consider to be a classic album, for me anyway. So that's what I meant by that.
Is that sort of your whole trick, that you're always keeping your standards sort of one step ahead of where you are?
Trying to, really. I just made an album that is totally satisfying for me. And it's there to be made.
So you can seriously tell me, of all the work you've done, there's nothing that you've been completely at home with and satisfied with? Completely satisfied with?
No. The nearest I would think would be maybe Every Picture Tells a Story. Came close. And the album before this, not Vagabond Heart, what was it called? Out of Order, was pretty close, but there's still some flaws on it. I think it is possible to make a classic album that really satisfies you, and satisfies you 10 years down the line. I know I'm singing a lot better now than I've done in the last 10 years. The range is there. I think the vocals are about as good as they're going to get. The voice is about as good as it's going to get now. It really is reached. I hate to say this, but it's just I'm knocked out to listen to my own voice, and I never used to be. I couldn't stand listening to my own voice.
Now, you say that you're being at your peak now as a vocalist. Is that luck or is that work? Is there stuff you do to make sure that you've maintained that?
Well, that would be a lot of hard work. The only luck that would come into it is I've looked after it. You know, I've got no polyps. I've got no terrible disease of the throat, as far as I know. Anyway, so there's a bit of luck in there. You know, I've been lucky that I don't smoke. I've never smoked, and so my voice is in pretty good condition. So, but I've had to work at it. I don't drink as much, anywhere near as much as I used to. It's an amazing instrument, the human voice. I'll have to tell you about it one day.
And alcohol really affects it that negatively?
Oh, different alcohol. White wine kills you. Takes all the lining off the throat. Red wine, just the opposite. A glass of red wine can help you.
I've never heard anyone say that. So that's interesting.
Well, I was just making it up, actually, so it shouldn't lie. No, it's serious.
One more question about the notes on Vagabond
Nose?
Heart. The notes.
Oh, sorry.
On Vagabond Heart. Why did you feel it was necessary to take the time and take the words to sort of lash out at your critics? I mean, they're never going to live a life as good as your own. They're never going to achieve what you've achieved. Why even dignify it with a response?
It was more or less trying to straighten out with the public that not everything you read about Rod Stewart, and a great deal of it is not true. I wasn't necessarily having to go at the critics, and I could have a go at the critics. I've had a bad lashing. Now they've seemed to have come round to be on my side again. But it was more or less sorting the people out. You know, I wanted them to know the truth. I mean, you don't know what's been written about me. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Just foul stuff. And I want people to know that most of it's not true.
Is the problem, you think, coming mostly from the traditional rock press or from the tabloids?
No, it's not the rock press. I can take that. You know, it's the tabloids. And you don't see them because I'm talking about the British papers. They're wicked. Wicked. I mean, it's okay in this country.
There's another side to that, and I'm thinking of the...
I'm a big boy, I can take it.
The cover story, the recent Rolling Stone cover story, and I suppose an element of this was tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
But there was this real treating you almost like royalty. Like really, like everything that you did and everything that you drank and everything that you said, and, you know, perpetuating this whole myth of rock royalty. And I'm wondering, to what degree do you sort of enjoy that, or what degree do you say to yourself, I'm a singer and that gets in the way of my art, or to what degree do you say, well, being a celebrity is part of my art?
I think with me, and not everybody, I think being a celebrity is part of the art. I mean, I've always been very flash. I was very flash when I was at school. It's not something that I've grown into since I've been in this business. I was always a real flash Harry, if you know what I mean by that. And that article, I think, is one of the funniest I've ever read. It really did make me laugh. I love humour, you know. I don't want you ever to attach too much, how can I put it, seriousness to anything I say, because I love humour.
It seems somewhat in the same vein that you were an entertainer, almost in a classic sense, at a time when it was not hip to be an entertainer, at a time when it was hip to be a musician, thinking of like the 1970s. And now it's sort of like it's come back around. People are entertainers again. Yeah,
absolutely. You've hit the nail right on the head. Every review we've had in the concert on this American tour, we've done 70-odd shows so far, so what, you know, fine entertainer he is. But I like to think of myself as a pretty good singer too, you know, more importantly.
Well, that's the thing. Do you think that sort of being a very public celebrity, being known as much as a celebrity as a musician in some quarters, do you think that that's created a situation where you are sold short, especially as a producer and as a songwriter, since a lot of people don't realize that you've written as much of your own material as you have, and for that matter, produced as much of your classic material as you have?
You've answered the question yourself there. You're absolutely right. It does get overlooked. But I can't complain, really, can I? Can't complain.
There's always been this fine line between like living well and being self-indulgent and being decadent and just having a good time, and a lot of people haven't been able to tread that fine line nearly as well as you have. I mean, why do you think you've had that judgment and others haven't?
I don't know, maybe I get scared. You know, I've never really been one for abusing my body. And as people know, I play a lot of soccer, hell of a lot. I still do, and I used to do it for a living. So maybe I'm just a bit aware of my body than most people. Yeah.
Does that become
does
that become more important as you get on?
How do you mean?
As you get older?
Oh yeah, you can't abuse yourself like you used to. I just abuse myself 3 nights of the week now instead of 7.
And that wraps up our conversation with Rod Stewart. Thanks for watching. I'm Tim Sommer for VH1 Inside Music Profiles.
Ron.